The night of the 22nd of July, 1944. Soldiers of the Red Army come upon Majdanek, the first major Nazi camp to be liberated, located in German-occupied Poland. This event becomes one of the most significant moments in the history of World War II and the Holocaust, as only after the liberation of the concentration camps, the full extent of Nazi crimes is finally exposed to the world. Soviet officials invite journalists to inspect the camp and to see for themselves the evidence of the horrors that have occurred there. One of the perpetrators responsible for these atrocities is Elsa Ehrich. Elsa Ehrich was born on the 8th of March 1914 in the town of Bredereiche, then part of the German Empire. Her parents, Anna and Albert, had her baptized as a Protestant on the 1st of June 1914, and her name in the church records was spelled as Elsa. Elsa's father worked as a skipper, and Elsa, after finishing school, began to work at a slaughterhouse. From 1930 to 1933, the global economic depression had ravaged Germany, leaving millions without work. The economic misery, fear of a worsening future, and frustration with the government's failure created a fertile ground for Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party's rise. On the 30th of January 1933, Adolf Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany, and soon after the Nazi authorities established concentration camps all over the country to handle the masses of people arrested as alleged subversives. These concentration camps, as well as the German police forces, were controlled by the SS. From 1939, the SS assumed responsibility for solving the so-called Jewish question, and after 1941 its leadership planned, coordinated, and directed the so-called final solution of the Jewish question. This solution was the annihilation of the European Jews, which we now refer to as the Holocaust. The Second World War began on the 1st of September 1939, when Nazi Germany invaded Poland. On the 15th of August 1940, Elsa Ehrich volunteered for service in the Ravensbrück concentration camp as an SS guard, becoming a part of the Nazi camp system. Ravensbrück, opened in May 1939, was the only major women's camp established by the Nazis. The camp was staffed both by SS men, who served as guards and administrators, and by 150 women, who served as supervisors. These female supervisors were either SS volunteers or women who had taken the job for the good pay and working conditions. The main camp contained 18 barracks. 2 of these barracks served as a prisoner sickbay, 2 served as warehouses, 1 served as a penal block, and 1 functioned as the camp prison until 1939, when a separate prison was built. The remaining 12 barracks served as the prisoners' housing, in which prisoners slept in 3-tiered wooden bunks. Each barrack had 1 washroom and toilets, but the sanitary conditions were poor and greatly deteriorated after 1943. Food rations for prisoners were meager at the outset, and the amount and quality of food the camp authorities allotted each prisoner decreased further after 1941. The SS required Ravensbrück prisoners to perform forced labor primarily in agricultural projects and local industry. By 1944, Germany increasingly relied on forced labor for the production of armaments. In total, some 132,000 women from all over Europe passed through the camp, including Poles, Russians, Jews, Gypsies, and others. Of that number, over 92,000 women perished. At Ravensbrück, Ehrich, through the eager performance of her responsibilities, rose rapidly in the overseer hierarchy, and from 1941 she worked as an SS Rapportführerin, or a report leader. Most report leaders in the SS were known for their brutality, and their primary duty was to conduct daily and evening roll calls, which was usually a long and grueling process involving prisoners sometimes standing for hours on end in all types of weather conditions. The report leaders also oversaw camp discipline of the prisoners, as well as the training for junior SS personnel. In mid-October 1942, Ehrich was transferred to the Majdanek concentration camp, where she became the head female overseer in charge of the women's camp. Directly upon arrival at Majdanek, prisoners were subjected to the camp admission process. Their personal belongings and clothes were taken away. Their personal data was written in the camp files, and they were assigned with prisoner numbers that were meant to replace their identities. The children deported to Majdanek were registered together with their mothers under the exact same number. All the newcomers were also subjected to the brutal and humiliating bathing and disinfection. In her testimony, former Majdanek prisoner Jadwiga Węgrzecka described her traumatic experience of bathing. One of the first things that shocked us entirely was the necessity to strip right under the eyes of that whole personnel. They were all males, mostly the Germans. Resistance was our first automatic reaction. We did not want to strip, though we had to do so eventually, because they started to yell and beat us. Women had to get dressed very rapidly after. The clothing taken from the camp storehouses were distributed randomly, with no attention paid to sizes or the current weather conditions. Then, the SS men would escort the newly admitted females to the field of the women's camp. All prisoners were forced to attend the everyday roll calls and were exploited in the exhausting obligatory labor. Living conditions inside the barracks were poor. When the first females arrived at Majdanek on the 7th of October 1942, the barracks in their part of the camp were still under construction, and they lacked even the most basic sanitary appliances. Although Elsa Ehrich was formally subjected directly to the camp commandant, her duties and tasks enforced close cooperation with the political department and prisoner camp. Ehrich and her deputy, Hermine Braunsteiner, were responsible for the daily roll calls and assignment of the female prisoners to the labor groups. In the winter of 1941 to 1942, Majdanek authorities began to use Zyklon B gas to murder prisoners too weak to work in a makeshift gas chamber. Mass murder operations using poison gas began at Majdanek in October 1942 and continued until the end of 1943. There appear to have been 3 gas chambers at Majdanek. At least 2 were shower rooms reconfigured for the use of Zyklon B gas. At least one of these 2 was used to kill human beings. The 2 smaller chambers could hold 150 people, the larger one 300. All 3 used Zyklon B, and at least 2 could also use carbon monoxide. Ehrich took part in the selection for the gas chamber, and she is believed responsible for the death of thousands of women and children. One Majdanek survivor later recalled, "To lure them, she brought cocoa and candy to the children's barracks, and a moment later, the truck showed up. Jewish children got on them smiling, still with candy in their hands. The cars drove straight to the crematorium." Ehrich, once a butcher shop assistant, was depicted as primitive by her former female inmates. However, at Majdanek she had the power to decide about matters of life and death. In the camp, Ehrich would become infamous for slapping and kicking the prisoners for no reason, and enjoyed brutally harassing as well as beating up especially weak, emaciated, and old women. She had a habit of hitting women in the face with her fist until blood showed. She did not spare even children, whom she beat and killed in front of their mothers. In the midst of this terror, brutality, sadism, and killing, there were people who made efforts to help their fellow prisoners. Dr. Stefania Pejanowska, who was trying to improve medical care for the prisoners, once asked Elsa Ehrich for an allowance of milk for her patients' babies. Upon hearing this, Ehrich slapped her face, yelling, "This is not a sanatorium, but a death camp." Pejanowska also recalled, "Everyone would beat us, from the camp commandant to the camp charges and officers. The camp commandant Anton Thumann would even come to the hospital at 2 in the morning while intoxicated, just to beat us in the face. But no one beat us as much or as painfully as Elsa Ehrich. She beat with passion and cold cruelty in her eyes. No SS woman did it as hard and as severely as she did, and she referred to female prisoners with contempt and hatred. On any pretext, she slapped and kicked them. She also selected children and elderly and weaker women for the gas chambers with great zeal, and she never showed mercy to anyone." In early 1943, Ehrich made an attempt to launch a Nazi brothel in the camp, but the project was abandoned after one of her slave sex workers was diagnosed with typhus. Ehrich herself became ill due to typhoid in February 1943. The same year, uprisings at the Treblinka and Sobibor killing centers and the Warsaw, Białystok and Vilna ghettos had led to increased concerns about Jewish resistance. To prevent further resistance, SS Chief Heinrich Himmler ordered the killing of surviving Jews in the Lublin district of German-occupied Poland. Most of the remaining Jews in this area were employed in forced labor projects and were concentrated in the camps of Trawniki, at least 4,000, Poniatowa, at least 11,000, and Majdanek, about 18,000. They were killed on the 3rd and 4th of November. In all three camps, Jews were forced to strip naked and walk into previously dug trenches, where they were shot. At Majdanek, the SS shot the Jews near the crematorium. Jews from other labor camps in the Lublin area were also taken to Majdanek and shot. Music was played through loudspeakers at both Majdanek and Trawniki to drown out the noise of the mass shootings. Approximately 42,000 Jews were killed during the Operation Harvest Festival, the largest German-perpetrated massacre of the Holocaust. When the evacuation of the Jewish prisoners to be killed during the Operation Harvest Festival had started, the SS guards went through the barracks, dragging out anyone who was hiding. Anyone who was sick was loaded onto trucks. Because the sick were only wearing underwear, the aforementioned prisoner Stefania Pejanowska threw blankets over them. Elsa Ehrich, who was supervising the loading, noticed this, pulled him off, lashed Pejanowska with a whip and told her, "Do not waste hospital property." After the Harvest Festival killings, the Lublin-Majdanek no longer had a majority of Jews among its prisoners. At the end of 1943, of 6,562 prisoners registered at Majdanek, approximately 71 were Jews. In mid-March 1944, surviving Jews from various subcamps of Majdanek were brought to the main camp for eventual evacuation west to Auschwitz and other concentration camps in the Reich. 834 Jews were imprisoned in Majdanek. Some were killed in the gas chambers between March and July 1944, and the SS transferred the rest to Auschwitz and Plaszow camps. According to the most recent research, over the course of 3 years, among an estimated 130,000 prisoners who entered Majdanek, 80,000 people perished at the camp. When the Majdanek concentration camp was evacuated, Ehrich was transferred to the Plaszow concentration camp in German-occupied Poland, and after its evacuation in September 1944, to the Neuengamme concentration camp in Germany, where she worked until April 1945. In May 1945, shortly after the end of the war, Elsa Ehrich was arrested by the British occupation authorities in Hamburg and transferred to US custody in the camp for war criminals in Dachau. Before being transferred to Poland, Ehrich shared her cell in Dachau with Maria Mandl, her equally sadistic Nazi comrade from the Ravensbrück concentration camp. In 1948, justice finally caught up with Elsa Ehrich when she stood before the District Court of Lublin at the second Majdanek trial. She was accused of committing war crimes and crimes against humanity. On the 10th of June 1948, Ehrich was found guilty of all charges and sentenced to death by hanging. After the announcement of the judgment, she asked Polish President Bolesław Bierut for clemency on the grounds that she had a small son and wanted to atone for her guilt. However, President Bierut rejected the request. Elsa Ehrich was 34 years old when she was executed in the Lublin prison on the 26th of October, 1948. There were no tears shed for Elsa Ehrich. Thanks for watching the World History Channel. Be sure to like and subscribe, and click the bell notification icon so you don't miss our next episodes. We thank you, and we'll see you next time on the channel.